Like all Sage Accpac applications, the first place to begin configuring a module is the Options icon within the Setup group. Here you will select settings such as to save transaction history, when items are costed, and whether or not to maintain fractional quantities. Item structures, locations, and a list of priceless codes are also maintained in the Setup group for the Inventory Control module. Account sets determine the general ledger account number for inventory, as well as various other accounting-related general ledger accounts, and categories are established to define more sales-related general ledger accounts, as well as to indicate if commissions are tracked and to create the default sales tax settings for items. As you establish the Inventory Control module, there are two icons which are needed to design your item numbers in Sage Accpac. The first is the item structures, and the second is the segment codes icon. The structure code of an item determines the format of an item, including the length and which segments are included, as well as any segment separators. The segment codes icon contains the list of values for a segment that requires validation, as determined in the setup icon. Let's take a look at Inventory Control setup options.
When configuring the Inventory Control module, begin by selecting IC Setup, and then Options. The first page displays the company details as entered within the company profile icon, discussed within the Financial Management Suite course. The company detail fields are unavailable for edit here because changes are done within the company profile. You can, however, enter specific inventory control contact and phone information to indicate a specific person as being responsible for the module. Moving to the processing page, the first field displays the functional currency. This was determined when you first established the database. However, notice the field to the right called multi-currency. If the multi-currency module was installed, and if multi-currency was indicated for use within the company profile icon of Common Services, then multi-currency can be turned on for inventory control transactions. When this option is selected, it cannot be turned off. That's why it is unavailable for edit on the window. If multi-currency is selected, then the default rate type is displayed. The rate type determines the exchange rate to use as defined within the currency tables. The next field is Allow Fractional Quantities. This is the switch that identifies the ability to select a fraction of an item's stocking unit of measure. Be careful with this setting because it is one of those settings that cannot be turned off after it is selected. This setting is probably best explained with an example. Let's say your company is a wine distributor and they want to stock all their wine by the case. As long as you never sell a fraction of a case, then you wouldn't need to turn this feature on. If, however, you occasionally sell a portion of a case, or even an individual bottle from a case of 12, let's say, then this option needs to be selected. This way, you can sell an individual bottle, which represents 1/12 of the stocking unit of measure, or 0.83333 cases. If, on the other hand, your stocking unit of measure is bottle, then fractional quantities is not necessary. You can still define a case unit of measure, but it is calculated as a multiplication of the stocking unit of measure and not a division of the stocking unit of measure. To simplify all this, you only need to select this option if you want to sell a fraction of whatever your stocking unit of measure is for a particular item. When selected, Inventory Control tracks all numbers with decimal points, even whole numbers, up to a total of 6 decimal places. The next option is Allow Items at All Locations. This option stocks items as a default at all the locations that have been added. If this option is selected, simply entering a receipt of an item at a location causes a link between the two to occur. If only one location exists, or if all items are stocked at all locations, then select this option. However, if several warehouses exist and specific items are planned to be stocked at specific warehouses with little overlap, then do not select this option because an item may accidentally be received at a location where it is not to be stocked. Let's look at an example. Let's say you have a warehouse in Aspen, Colorado, and another in Los Angeles, California. Let's also assume you have decided that you do not want to stock snow skis in the Los Angeles warehouse, or for that matter, surfboards in the Aspen, Colorado warehouse. By deselecting this option, you can manually identify which items are allowed at which locations. If you attempt to receive an item at a location that is not allowed, an error message is displayed. The Allow Negative Inventory Levels option allows more items than you actually have existing in inventory to be sold. This feature might be good for those companies that have items with quick turnover, where you constantly need to ship items that just arrived on the receiving dock but have not actually received into inventory yet. Or for those companies where the cost does not fluctuate very often. In any event, even if the cost does fluctuate, you can instruct the system to automatically record the cost as entered on the receipt, as long as the receipt for the items is posted within the same day-end processing routine, assuming you are costing items during day-end processing, discussed in a later session. This feature may not be a good choice if the cost of the items constantly fluctuate, because inventory control will cost negative inventory items upon shipment using the item's most recent cost. If the actual cost of the item when it is received into the system at a later date is different, Accpac updates the cost. However, it will be reflected upon your next shipment of the item and not occur immediately. Allowing negative inventory levels may also distort commission amounts if they are being tracked by sales margin. The next option, Allow Receipt of Non-Stocked Items, allows the entry of a receipt for an item that is often purchased but normally isn't stocked within inventory, such as special ordered items or items used internally such as photocopy paper or pens. Selecting this option maintains a list and tracks items for reporting and inquiry purposes, but does not maintain an inventory quantity level. The Keep Transaction History option maintains transaction details of documents you have processed within inventory control, with the ability to recall them and review them online rather than having to resort to printed reports. Although saving transaction history does utilize disk space, it is a good idea to select this option and keep your transaction details for a time period sufficient for auditing or reviewing. You have the ability to clear this information at any time, so maintaining it for at least a short time can be beneficial. The Delete During Posting option provides the ability to immediately remove inventory transaction information upon it being posted, rather than it being saved for future review or audit. For example, after entering and posting a receipt batch within inventory control, with this option selected, the system prompts to immediately remove the history of the receipt that was just posted. If it is removed, reference to the receipt will not appear on the transaction history report. If the history is kept, the receipt can be recalled. If you are concerned that a transaction might accidentally be deleted, do not select this option, and instead allow the system to automatically save the transaction details. The transaction details can be cleared manually if necessary. The next field, Only Use Defined Unit of Measure, forces someone entering items to select from a predefined list of unit of measures. In other words, you have to define each, dozen, case, and so on for those units of measure you plan to use. If a list is created and then later it's determined that box or pallet are needed, they have to be added to the master unit of measure list before they can be assigned to an item. With this option off, the entry of any unit of measure for any item is allowed. Therefore, one item may have each identified with a capital E, and a lowercase ach, where a different item may have each defined as a lowercase ea and a period. You can see then that selecting this option defines a standard. Moving to the right side of the window, there are two fields called alternate amount 1 and 2. These fields are optional, however, they can be used to store alternate item cost descriptions or be used as a factor for calculating a tax base. Additionally, they can be used to track item costs using the user-specified costing method. An example here is landed cost, which may identify what the cost of an item is after customs and/or duty fees are factored in. The default weight unit of measure field determines as a default how the weight for items are tracked. Depending on the company, this may be pounds, kilograms, ounces, or if selling liquids, gallons or liters. When an item is added, the default identified here can be accepted, or a different weight unit measure can be entered. The next field determines what will happen to any additional cost amounts that have been applied to items on a receipt within inventory control in the event an item on the receipt is subsequently returned to the vendor. Select prorate to have the additional cost be prorated to the other items that were on the original receipt, or select leave to leave the additional cost associated with the item to remain with the item number, even if it means that there is a cost associated with an item with zero quantity. After posting, an adjustment can be made to correct any cost issues. For example, if an inventory receipt contains 3 items, A, B, and C, and item A is returned at a later date, the additional cost allocated to item A either remains with item A by selecting the leave option, or be distributed to the other 2 items, B and C, on the receipt if the prorate option is selected. In this example, if the leave option is selected and item A now contains a zero quantity, there will be a cost associated with an item with zero quantity. The amount will be adjusted to other item A's when a receipt is posted later. The next field determines when inventory control is to update the cost values of items. Selecting day-end processing indicates to update the cost of all item transactions when the day-end processing function is performed. Up until this function is performed, the cost of all receipts, shipments, transfers, and assemblies are stored in a temporary file. The posting option instructs inventory to update the cost immediately upon posting a transaction. Therefore, the cost of an item is immediately reflected when a shipment, a receipt, a transfer, or any other transaction entered within inventory is posted. So, what's the better choice? Well, it depends. Having this option set to posting does allow a real-time cost value to be calculated, so at any time the cost basis for any item can be observed. However, if inventory levels are allowed to go negative, and a sale is posted that causes an item to go negative, the system will use the most recent cost as the cost for the items that go negative. Therefore, if this option is set to posting, then the most recent cost value will be reflected in the cost of the item. If the receipt for the item is posted later that same day, and the cost on that receipt was different from the item's most recent cost, then a cost mismatch exists, at least temporarily, until the item is shipped the next time. However, selecting day-end processing as the costing update choice, the newly received cost value will replace the previously assigned most recent cost value, and the actual cost value used on the sale will actually be correct. Of course, this assumes that the shipment and receipt both occur within the same day-end processing routine. The last processing option is to define a default goods in transit location. Although this is optional, if a location is entered, it becomes the default location automatically when goods in transit item transfers are created. A goods in transit location is a virtual location identifying items that are in transit from one location to another, such as on a truck or ship, that are temporarily not available for shipment. Items residing in a transit location cannot be sold from the location. The lower portion of the window identifies how item statistics are to be tracked. First of all, are they kept, of which, if deselected, there are no other decisions to make. With the option selected, statistics for both sales and transactions can be kept for items, such as how many items were sold in a specific time frame, or what the item's sales and cost amounts are. Statistical information can also be modified. The time frame to track statistics is determined by the answers in the Accumulate By and Period Type fields. For Accumulate By, statistics can be tracked by calendar year or fiscal year. And for Period Type, from weekly through annually. When establishing a new database, it may be necessary to edit the statistical amounts. This way, statistical values can be entered for previous periods. Normally, this option is not selected after the system is up and running because Accpac automatically updates the values as transactions are entered and posted. One other point regarding statistics is that the statistical values should not be changed within the middle of the year. The reason is because the existing historical information that is already posted will not match the new criteria. For example, if you were tracking statistics monthly and then elected to change it to weekly, what was month 1, 2, 3 is now week 1, 2, 3, so future periods will not have the same time frame as previous posted periods for comparison. The Items page identifies the segments necessary to create items. In the example here, you see category, style, color, among others that have already been added. For your company, you might have size, pattern, and series. By identifying item segments, it indicates the ability to report or inquire on specific segments of the item. From 1 to 10 item segments can be created. Identify the length of the segment, from 1 to 24 characters, and whether the segment is to be validated against a list of choices. If a segment is validated, like the color segment is here, it indicates that someone entering items must enter a valid color choice, such as yellow, green, or blue, in order for an item to be added. By validating a segment, it keeps users from adding items that don't exist. For example, if red was not a valid choice, you will not be able to save the item and instead require a selection to be made from a list of valid choices. Any one item's total length can be no more than 24 characters. This includes any segment separators which happen to be identified in the lower left portion of this window. This section determines which special characters are allowed as segment separators. Selecting No next to the character indicates that the character can be used as part of the item number and not used as a segment separator, so plan accordingly. The Documents page determines the length of each document number for each of the available document types, and if specific prefix characters will precede the number. The system uses the designated next number as the starting point and increments from there for each document. The length of any document number can be up to 22 characters, including the prefix. This window also displays the next sequential day-end number. This number begins at 1 and increments from there. The lower portion of the window displays the aging periods. These are used when printing aged inventory reports. Next, let's look at the GL integration icon. The integration page determines how inventory control integrates with General Ledger. The first decision is to determine when the transaction batches are to be created within the General Ledger. Depending on the cost items during question discussed earlier within IC options, the choices are either during posting, or on request using the Create GL Batch icon. However, if the day and processing option was selected as the cost items during choice within IC options, the choices will be during day and processing or on request using the Create GL Batch icon. How do these options work? Well, the during posting option creates or updates a batch in General Ledger whenever transactions are posted within inventory control. The during day and processing option, which doesn't appear here because the posting option was selected within IC options, creates or updates a batch in General Ledger when day and processing is performed within inventory control. The on request using Create GL Batch icon option creates a temporary file containing all the posted information entered from within inventory control and retains it until the GL Batch icon option is performed, of which the General Ledger updates the transactions at that time. It's really a question as to when you want General Ledger to receive inventory transactions. The integration window also allows flexibility on how the batch in General Ledger is to be created. Should inventory append to an existing General Ledger batch by selecting the Adding to an Existing Batch option, create a new General Ledger batch each time transactions are posted within inventory by selecting the Creating a New Batch option, or create a new batch and post it immediately within the General Ledger by selecting the Creating and Posting a New Batch option. Selecting the Posting option in the previous field and the Creating and Posting a New Batch option in this field will instruct inventory control and General Ledger to operate like a real-time accounting system where transactions are updated in both inventory and General Ledger at the same time. It's important to note that the Adding to an Existing Batch option appends to an existing batch within General Ledger only if the batch currently in General Ledger originated from inventory control. In addition, the batch requires an open status, or General Ledger will create a new batch anyway. If the batch being appended is flagged Ready to Post, inventory cannot append to the batch and instead create a new one. Inventory also allows the ability to consolidate transactions, or not, before they get submitted to General Ledger. Accounts can be consolidated by account number for each fiscal period, or by account number for each fiscal period and source code. If no consolidation is selected, each individual account detail on a transaction is retained intact. Use this option to retain transactional optional field values that are assigned to account details. Doing so, however, lengthens your General Ledger transaction listing report because each transaction may have different optional field values. If Consolidate Transaction Details by Account is selected, a single transaction containing multiple occurrences of the same General Ledger account are consolidated. Drill down is still possible because the consolidation occurs for the same account in the same transaction. If Consolidate by Account and Fiscal Period is selected, the system consolidates the same General Ledger account from multiple transactions when the account and fiscal period are the same. Where if Consolidate by Account, Fiscal Period, and Source is selected, the system consolidates the same General Ledger account from multiple transactions when the account, fiscal period, and source code is the same. These last two consolidation options result in the loss of future drill down because multiple transactions are consolidated. The transaction page determines which inventory fields to transfer to the General Ledger reference and description fields. Different fields can be sent to either the General Ledger Transaction Journal header or detail fields. For each transaction type, define which fields to send. For example, double-click the row to be assigned, such as the receipt transaction type. The system displays the fields that can be assigned. In this case, the description field was selected. Notice, however, that multiple fields can be selected. When multiple fields are selected, the entire text entered in the field selected first is sent, and then, if there is room, the text in the next field until the target field is full.
There are several components related to inventory control setup that you will need to define. To begin learning about each of these components, let's take a look at the setup components.